The following program is sponsored by CBN.
Coming up, the rise of the superbugs. Antibiotics aren't working. People are dying, and the drug companies are turning a blind eye. CBN News talks to a doctor on the front line of this epidemic and discovers a way you can treat and prevent disease. Plus, from the hit show Last Man Standing, actor Jonathan Adams joins us live on today's 700 Club.
Well, welcome to the 700 Club. It's a shocking fact. 19 million Americans are in the path of destruction after nearly 4 dozen tornadoes have ripped through 6 states this weekend, leveling homes and tossing trees. Now the Midwest is bracing for round 2. Ephraim Graham has that report.
In the region known as Tornado Alley, many are still recovering from the weekend destruction.
I just kind of shoved her into the closet and put my back against it and just prayed through the whole thing.
It's touching down!
In Nebraska, one tornado almost killed the storm chasers who were tracking it.
Tornado!
In Kansas, the massive tornado overturned a tractor trailer that was driving nearly 2 miles away.
It just now knocked the semi over.
At one point, there were nearly 50 reports of tornadoes in just 24 hours.
I really did not think that we were coming out of here alive.
Now, those same people could face round 2. The National Weather Service says a potent spring storm system is expected to bring more thunderstorms to the region Monday, with tornadoes possible for cities stretching from Kansas to Texas, with Oklahoma at a special risk. Schools in parts of the state have already canceled classes today ahead of the expected storm, including Moore County, where 6 years ago today, a massive tornado killed 24 people and injured more than 200. Ephraim Graham, CBN News.
I don't have an answer for why the storms are so intense, but this has been probably one of the worst seasons of this kind of devastation. And flooding is reached an epic proportion. In other news, President Trump is calling for unity in the pro-life community. But his recent comments highlighted division in the GOP. Let's go back to Ephraim for more.
Pat, from Alabama to Missouri, strong pro-life laws are sweeping the country, but there is a divide among Republicans over just how far the laws should go. Amber Strong has the story from Washington.
President Trump took to Twitter to tout his pro-life victories, but there's something about the tweets that made abortion opponents take a second look. I am strongly pro-life with 3 exceptions, Trump tweeted: rape, incest, and protecting the life of the mother, the same position taken by Ronald Reagan. And he isn't alone. Other leading conservatives question if recent laws like those in Alabama and Missouri go too far.
I don't support the Alabama law. I believe that there ought to be exceptions. I'm pro-life, but there ought to be exceptions.
But in my whole political career, I also believed in rape, incest, or life of the mother.
But for some pro-life advocates, this is merely an opening battle for war at the Supreme Court.
Actually, for the future of our country, Roe is destined to become a historical footnote.
No law is constitutional until the Supreme Court actually revisits Roe versus Wade.
When it comes to the life issue, President Trump is calling on supporters to stay united ahead of 2020, saying the administration has worked hard to fight abortion, appointing conservative judges from the federal level to the Supreme Court.
We stand without apology for the sanctity of human life.
It's a battle they vow to continue, and one Democratic presidential candidate's welcome, with some like Senator Kirsten Gillibrand hoping to codify Roe v. Wade into federal law.
President Trump has started a war on America's women, and if it's a fight he wants to have, it's a fight he's gonna have.
If you're asking me, would I ever appoint a Supreme Court justice who does not believe in defending Roe versus Wade, who does not believe that a woman has a right to control her own body, I will never do that.
And that Supreme Court battle may begin a little bit sooner. This week, the justices will decide whether to hear a case out of Indiana that requires pregnant women to get an ultrasound 18 hours before an abortion. Amber Strong, CBN News in Washington.
The debate continues. Pat?
You know, if you go back to the history, Roe versus Wade was a put-up job by the ACLU. Norma Covey was the plaintiff in the case. She has later renounced her position. The case was called Blackmun's abortion. It rested on a strange case in Connecticut, Griswold versus Connecticut, that had to do with privacy and the right to get contraceptives. And the whole thing had no legal basis whatsoever. Now we're acting like it's something that came down from Mount Sinai by God Almighty, and it wasn't. It was a wrongly decided case, and it should have been taken off the books. Here's the deal. Abortion is a state matter. It is part of what is called the state police power. And the people of any state under our Constitution have the right to vote on what they feel in relation to marriage, abortion, etc. But once that's pulled away from them and made a matter of constitutional right, then the people have lost their power and it becomes a federal matter. And because of the way it was dealt with, it has been nothing short of contentious ever since it was decided. But Roe versus Wade, with all its faults, decided that abortion in the first trimester was something that could be controlled. And now they have taken it all the way to what is called partial birth abortion, which is a baby already leaving the birth canal and being partially born, and the idea is, how do you kill it? Then we also have a governor of Virginia who says, well, if abortion fails and a baby's born alive, then you keep the baby comfortable until you decide whether you want to murder it or not. That's infanticide. We don't want to stand for that, and how can the Democrats stand for it? How can anybody stand and say, I am for infanticide? And it has nothing to do with the life of the mother. It has nothing to do with health. It has to do with whether you want to kill babies or not. And we have slaughtered close to 60 million babies in America since Roe versus Wade. It has been an absolute disaster. And it should be left to the voters of the states, whatever your feeling is, but the idea of a constitutional amendment is not going to happen. And overturning Roe versus Wade is going to be difficult, but certainly you cannot have an extreme case that'll put somebody in jail for 99 years for performing an abortion. You can't have these extreme things and think it'll get through the Supreme Court. It won't. So if you want to hammer away at Roe versus Wade, the best way to do it is to do it incrementally, and it can be done. Well, that's the way it is. Well, the president has also said something that I think is very important, and Ephraim has that.
Pat, President Donald Trump says he does not want war with Iran, but he is talking tough after an attack on the U.S. Green Zone in Baghdad. The president tweeting Sunday, if Iran wants to fight, that will be the official end of Iran. Never threaten the United States again. This came after a missile was fired into the area where Iraqi government offices and the U.S. embassy are located. No American facilities were hit and no one injured. Last week, the U.S. ordered all non-essential personnel out of Iraq after surveillance photos showed Iranian militia loading missiles on ships. The U.S. is also moving a carrier battle group and B-52 bombers into the region.
I just don't want them to have nuclear weapons, and they can't be threatening us. And you know, with all of everything that's going on, and I'm not one that believes, you know, I'm not somebody that wants to go into war.
U.S. sanctions imposed on Iran after the U.S. pulled out of President Obama's nuclear deal are crippling that country's economy. Police are investigating the firebombing of a Christian TV studio in Jerusalem. So far, officers do not have any suspects in the firebombing of the Daystar television network's new facilities. As Chris Mitchell now reports, the attack destroyed its new studio, but Daystar plans to rebuild.
The fire began early Saturday morning when an arsonist started a fire in the Daystar studio. Daystar was in the midst of a major renovation and upgrade of its studio here in Jerusalem, overlooking Mount Zion and the Temple Mount. The fire destroyed the new work and much of the existing facility.
The control room is, I'd say, probably totally devastated.
Dave Charette, the general contractor overseeing the renovations, showed us the destruction.
This is where we filmed from. There were 4 cameras that would be back in this area here, and Marcus and Joni would be, or their interviewee would be sitting here, and then you have this fabulous view behind them.
Yeah. These before and after shots reveal the extent of the devastation.
We're here in the new Daystar TV studios in Jerusalem, Israel.
Marcus and Joni Lamb dedicated the Daystar Jerusalem studio in March of 2011. Daystar is one of the largest Christian television networks in the world that reaches more than 200 countries and nearly 700 million people with its programs. Even in the midst of the destruction, Charette believes God is at work.
I believe that God has a reason and a purpose, and at the very least, He'll redeem what has happened here. So these ashes will be raised up and proclaim the glory of God.
Daystar pledges to continue their Jerusalem operations and asks for prayer for continued protection. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
A little girl abducted in Texas has been found after the heroic efforts of two pastors. Salem Sabatka and her mom were taking a walk when a man grabbed Salem and pulled her into his car. Salem's mother jumped in the car and tried to fight the abductor, but he pushed her out. 12 hours later, two pastors voluntarily went out to look for Salem. They found the man's vehicle in a hotel parking lot. Jeff King is a pastor in the area and a friend of Salem's dad.
I have two boys, and I would have wanted as many eyes looking out for my boys as possible. I feel like God allowed me to be a tool.
Police say Salem was found calm and unharmed. To God be the glory. Pat?
Well, that's a miracle. That was all filmed. That mother was walking with the child. The car pulls up, grabs the child. The mother tries to fight him off. He pushes her to the ground. She falls to the ground and gets up. And they caught him because people had their eyes open.